You're on the air now. If you want to take down the Nebraska flag, you can do just that.
No,
Okay,
that's
it
my
was
team,
all that
man.
fact. When
That's
you
my
look at
team.
what you did, I mean, look at the way they lost. I mean, you got to look at a little bit more detail in things that happened. You look
That
at
was
the interceptions by Jeff Sims,
that was
and
just typical shit. The way it's been for a lot of years. They Scott Frost's first game, if I recall correctly, they lost on a Hail Mary at the gun.
wow,
And from that point it was just continually downhill. I'm not going to say if they knocked that ball down and beat BYU, things would be different, but it was a sign of things to come. And I hope this is not a sign of things to come for Matt Rule because it's just more of the same. Minnesota had no business winning that game. Yeah, they made the defensive play, but Anthony Grant got dropped down to the third spot on the depth chart because of fumbling. And then they have him in there when you're trying to close out the game. And what does he do? He fumbles.
fumbles.
So,
Wow,
that's part of a coaching decision. And then Jeff Sims staring down his receiver like he's a freshman straight out of high school in his first college game, gave the ball away. And I mean, the defense played great. You could say Minnesota's didn't have their running back, the line wasn't blocking, or their new quarterback still getting adjusted. But their new quarterback played plenty last year and did well.
yeah.
And so it's just typical of the way things have been. It was very, very frustrating, man. I couldn't believe it.
Well, Jeff Sims, in his defense, well, he was a dual threat quarterback coming out of high school. He ultimately went to Georgia Tech, where you know is not a place you go if you're a passing quarterback anyway. Dual threat in high school normally means just a running back who throws the football, and he does it better than most people. So when he got to Georgia Tech, you saw a lot more of that because they never really had a quarterback that threw well, with the exception of Joe Hamilton, who was probably the last quarterback who threw forward passes with real intent. Now he goes to Nebraska, which is known for their option, but they're not running the option now. This is a new age in Nebraska. And he throws the interceptions, but I don't think he ever really learned or grasps the concepts of the way you're supposed to go about being a
Look off the
quarterback.
safety.
Praying it, got to look off safeties, things that sound basic, but when you're in the
Mm.
fire and these players are coming after you, all those things you've done in practice that's supposed to have been repetitive so that it becomes one of these memory things, muscle memory things. It just didn't happen for him. Now, do you believe it's going to be like that for the rest of the year, or is he just an option quarterback in someone's offense trying to be, a passer, which he's not?
I can't really say. I think you're more familiar with Jeffson's than I am.
Yeah.
Um, Hopefully they break down the film and say, look, this guy was open here. The interception before the half, he had a guy wide open on the goal line. Instead, he tries to throw it to the corner, and the cornerback faded, and it looked like he threw it right to him, but the cornerback was reading his eyes and went over there and got in front of the ball. But if he throws it to the guy at the goal line, there's nobody in front of that guy at the goal line. So that if he makes a good ball pass and puts it on his chest, he either catches it or drops it. But there's no interception, they can still kick the field goal. I mean, he just doesn't make good reads.
Well, and I think that might be a thing that's going to happen a lot of times, and Matt Rule may have to make another decision at the quarterback spot. I think the seniority or just being an upperclassman was the reason why he's a starter right now. In addition to Matt Rule believing after seeing what else was there that he might have been the best guy for the job starting the season. But that leads us to our next thing.
Wait.
How do you
Another
think
thing.
next
Another,
week against
another
Colorado?
thing. Hold on. Another thing could have been the play that was called. They're on the short side of the field, and they send three receivers over there where there's not a lot of room. You got the wide side on the other side of the field. Why don't you try running action over to that side where there's more room to cover and less chance of a guy who's at the goal line being able to slide back 6 yards and intercept the pass in the corner?
With a quarterback like that. So
Really, with the onion quarterback, you want guys in space, not crowded in a little bit of space.
well, you also look at the way a coach thinks about it. This is the obvious thing to do would be to go to the wide side. So you kind of being deceptive. You want to keep it on the spot that they least
So he's too
expect you to
smart
do
for
it,
his own good.
and it didn't work out.
Too
And
smart for your own good. When you try and trick them, you end up tricking yourself usually.
man, when these coaches are getting as much as they're getting, they're always trying to prove the point that they deserve the check they're getting, and they're always trying to outsmart the other guy or even outsmart themselves, and you get spots like that. Sometimes you get onside kicks when you shouldn't get onside kicks, but they still do it. And if they get it, they're a hero. If they miss it, they're just a goat.
And here's another thing: when the coach is looking at that play, he's thinking, well, if he throws it to the guy at the goal line, the play worked perfectly. I called the right play. But I still believe you don't put a bunch of guys in the small space.
Well, and that's probably conventional wisdom, yeah. But in the game of deception, I guess he would expect them to think the way you're thinking, and it still backfired. Was it the execution by the quarterback, or was it the actual play call? I mean, it could have been both, but it might have been the quarterback. And the way he's
Well, like I said, he did make a bad read, but I didn't like the play either. I mean, I'm sure he showed things in practice, so they have to have some idea of how well he reads a defense and his decision making. And either they misread it, miscalculated, or maybe he just choked in the game. I don't know.
Well, right now, first game of the season, first game jitters, we call it all the time, but you kind of seen a trend like this with Scott Frost as well, and you're hoping that they're shaking that trend. I think Matt Rule could help them shake that trend. I think he's a good enough coach to be able to do that. Obviously, better than Matt Rule. He has, I'm not going to say a pedigree, but hell, really a pedigree. He's coached longer than Scott Frost did, and he's bringing in the talent. So we'll see. And it'll be a long story.
It's just shockingly amazing how they lost it in the same fashion that they lost so many games under Frost. I mean, you got a guy got ejected for a face mask to face mask hit that was totally unnecessary, and he was one of the better guys on your defensive line, more experienced, so you would expect better of him. I mean, that's the kind of crap that went on under Frost, just undisciplined crap. And
they'll get an opportunity.
Maybe, huh?
I mean, they're going to get an opportunity ASAP because they will be taking on Colorado this week, and they will be going on the road again for Colorado's opener. And as we all know now, Colorado, I don't know if they're the truth, but they certainly showed a lot more than people were expecting going into this season, going into this game, taking on the runner-ups of the national championship game. But really, do you bring that up when you talk about TCU, when you lose 65-7 and you lost practically everybody from that team, ranked number 17? Typically, if you were a runner-up, you're probably going to get ranked in the top 10. They're number 17, at least going into this game. And Deion Sanders, everything that he said and everything that he's preached seems as though it came into fruition. This is just one game. But you know what? No one else looked at it as just one game. They looked at it as a 21-point blowout, according to Vegas. They looked at it as a hope Deion loses or Coach Prime loses because people who didn't like him. We talked about it last week. We're rooting for Coach Prime. But the way this game turned out, possibly one of the best games of the weekend, and that includes last night's FSU-LSU game that we'll talk about later too.
Right. Colorado came out guns blazing, man. They put up 45 points, 500 yards passing, 500 plus. There's talk about the new kid, Travis Hunter.
Travis Hunter, 6'6".
They're already talking Heisman candidate after one game. So, Prime, he got the job done. Week one, he got his boys ready to play, and that offense it looks very dangerous, man.
Yeah, of course, there are things they're going to have to really shore up. Obviously, this is the first game. Obviously, they have multiple players that have come through the transfer portal, still trying to get that cohesion with the overall team, not just on a unit like the offensive line, but the entire team. And they've given up several yards on the ground, over 500 yards themselves. There was over 1,100 total yards in this game between both teams. But as far as Travis Hunter goes, this is one game in front of the national spotlight. Talent-wise, still the number one player in the country the year that he came out of high school. He chose Jackson State when Florida State was supposed to have been the school he was going to. And we see now Florida State is definitely back to their old ways of winning and possibly being a top-tier team. And he's done the same thing with HBCUs. I mean, when he was at Jackson State and he had his opportunity in spring practice, when he first got there, he was the best player on the field as a true freshman. And now you see him in a Power 5 team, practically where he belongs anyway. But growing up, nonetheless, with a team that was 1-11 last year, but like TCU, do you really look at that 1-11 team from last year when everyone's gone and it's been completely revamped? and he showed up on offense and defense and anywhere else you needed him. And
Yeah, that's crazy.
it reminds me a lot of what Charles Woodson did. That's how that defensive player got himself a Heisman, because he didn't just play defensive back. He went on offense and he did special teams. And if Travis Hunter can continue to play like this, bro, if his body holds up,
Yeah,
because they're using him to his
that's a lot of snaps on both sides of the ball. He had 11 catches for 100. I can't even remember. A lot of yards.
Yeah.
So he already, you can see he already, he's in sync with his quarterback. So there's no issue there. He's going to get the ball.
Oh, he's going to get the ball. And Deion Sanders' son, that's the guy I spoke about before this game came. I wonder if he could really step up from playing HBCU football, which is different. And I don't care who thinks it's not. It's different. It's slower. It's not the same as even the lowest tier of Power 5 football, especially the runner-ups from the national championship game. He goes in there, and you know what? You got to look beyond the numbers if you want to be critical at all. 510 yards. If you look at it on the surface, there's nothing to argue about. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. You can't argue about that. But looking at what he had done and how he had gotten there, dumping the pass off, rarely going downfield. And when he did go downfield, receivers had to come back for the ball because the arm strength didn't seem like it was there. However, Travis Hunter did drop that pass in the end zone, which was right in his hands. He hit the ground, the ball came loose, and he was dumping passes off to the running back who was going and making touchdowns. It was a huge day numbers-wise, but when he was in the pocket and he had to look from left to right and scan the field and right to left, that's when he had those 4 sacks as well. He didn't process the information as well initially. He got better as the game went on, and now that he's had a taste of that speed, maybe against Nebraska, we see a little bit more of his quarterback IQ rather than just his arm strength, lack thereof, and just playmakers bailing him out on short passes.
Right. And the game, Nebraska against Minnesota, the defense was pretty dominant, but even from the first half to the second half, there was a difference. They weren't getting any pressure on the quarterback first half. Second half, they started to get pressure, and they actually got a few sacks. And that's the defense they're going to need. They can't allow him to just sit back there and scan the field and find his open receivers. They're going to have to get pressure on him, force him into bad decisions, maybe throw a pick or two. That remains to be seen if they can do that.
And as I've said about him being disrupted by the pass rush and scanning and not being able to really process the information quickly initially, eventually he got around to it and was doing better, and especially after halftime when you do go in and make those adjustments. If Nebraska can get that pressure on them, he probably will have those issues. But now, from what you saw against Minnesota, how does that Nebraska team take care of all those other pieces and parts that catch the ball for him, that get these dumps and do those, do the things that they run afterwards, run after the pass. They do excellent things. I mean,
well, they're already set up for it. They run a 3-3-5 with 5 DBs on the field as it is. So it's just how they figure out to get pressure. They're going to have the quickest players on the field. So they should be able to keep everything in front of them. That's what they did against Minnesota. But Minnesota really didn't take any deep shots, maybe 1 or 2. I don't know if Colorado will, but like I said, going up against a spread offense or receivers going all over the field, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. Scheme-wise, anyway, covering them is a different thing altogether.
Because even though most of the roster left, and that was an addition by subtraction with all those players leaving from a 1-11 team.
Patrick Ewing effect.
Huh?
The Patrick Ewing effect.
Patrick Ewing effect. Of all people, right? Patrick Ewing effect. You bring in all of this talent, and you really don't know where to put them. You have an idea where to put them. You don't know what you're going to get until you see them in live action. Now we've seen them in live action, and Dylan Edwards, the running back, was insane getting the ball out of the backfield. I mean, he's very hard to catch. He reminds me a lot of, Deuce Vaughn. And another Kansas guy, by the way. Kansas puts out these running backs like one after the other. And you don't even have to name drop somebody like Barry Sanders. I mean, even a Nebraska legend, or would have been a legend, DeAngelo Evans, also a guy who came from Kansas. Old Brian Shea from Emporia State. I know no one knows who Emporia State too well, but he did lead all of college football in rushing at one point until his record was broken. So Bryce Brown from years ago, the number one running back in the country. So these running backs coming out of Kansas isn't something that's unfamiliar. But also when it comes to Deion Sanders after the game, now I know how much coaches and people are like, regular people are like, wanted him to lose the game. They could say what they want, but you know what it would have been if he would have lost that game. They didn't care about how tough his team might have played. They don't care how good they might have looked in a loss. They wanted to say, I told you so. See, it's different. This isn't an HBCU. But he got the complete opposite. There were haters out there. And let me say, there were haters even at the HBCU, particularly the one that he left, Jackson State, who, by the way, lost to FAMU. And it broke their SWAC winning streak because they lost to FAMU without Deion Sanders and the talent he took with him. And so now you had HBCU fans that didn't like him because they claimed that he turned his back on them. And then you have people who don't like his, bravado, and he just shoves it all in their faces.
Hey, too bad he's here. You're gonna have to deal with it. And I guess he let him know about it after the game, and people didn't like that. But hey, to what? I mean, so what? Too bad for you. You keep that same energy. If you're gonna dish it out, talk poorly about him and his new program. When he comes out and wins his first game and he's got something to say, you just take it. Shut up and take it. You said what you had to say. Let him say what he has to say. Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah, and what's the problem really? I mean, is the problem his bravado? Because he doesn't come with the real, the bravado he's had from years past. He's praising God and all of the stuff that he would normally do these days. He's not. They claim that they don't like the way he went about the transfer portal. You don't tear down a team. Why are you worried about how he puts his team together or how he tears down a team to put a team together? And I think their problem is the way he went about the process, where if it worked for them, they would do the same. The difference is they go to the transfer portal for 4, 5, or 6 players, and he went for 2 rosters full of players, and they don't like that part.
Right. They're mad because they can't do it. Are they trying to say you should have kept the same players and built them up and taken your lumps and see what you could have done with those guys? Yeah, right. Come on, man. Who wouldn't take this 5-star from that school and this 4-star from that school? Or you want to come to? Yeah, come on. We're taking whoever. Yeah, sorry guys. You guys lost 11 games last year. You're gone. I got these new guys. Who wouldn't do that?
Man, and that's exactly what's going to happen. He's the Pied Piper in this case right here. Maybe the commercials that he takes and does with Nick Saban helps, but he's the toast of the town. He was the biggest story all week, regardless of whatever happened in college football. Deion Sanders and what he did, and it would have been the same regardless whether he had won or lost. It's just a bigger deal because there was a 21-point favorite in front of him on the road in 100+ degree weather out there in the football field. His boys were dogs. They might not have been as talented as TCU across the board, or at least the guys that we've seen, but the ones who did make the plays. Tell me somebody on TCU who's more talented than Travis Hunter. I don't think I saw him that day.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm sure TCU fancies themselves as having a good defense. They got 45 hung on them week 1. So they got a lot of work to do on that defense.
And, and speaking of Deion Sanders and his former school, even though he's no longer claiming them, FSU, they played last night against LSU, another ACC SEC matchup. Well, and the SEC fell short in this matchup the same way as South Carolina fell short against North Carolina the same day, the night before. And this time around, Florida State absolutely destroyed LSU. No one saw that coming. LSU as a 2-point favorite going into the game, even though it was in Orlando, a pretty much de facto home game for Florida State. Florida State was very good. I was surprised.
I want to know what was going on with Brian Kelly. He was coaching that game like it's a video game, going for it on 4th down every time, getting stopped. Sometimes you got to take the points, man. You might not be happy with 3, but 3 is better than 0. And walking with your head down to the sideline because you got stopped repeatedly. It didn't happen just once. And they left those points out there. Florida State got rolling, and they got away from him. I think he was thoroughly outcoached.
I never was on this Brian Kelly bandwagon. I don't know why. I liked him when he was at Cincinnati. He got the Notre Dame job, and I was like, really? Him? But he got the Notre Dame job. But when he came to LSU and SEC country, I was Pretty surprised. I thought that he would be a lifer at Notre Dame, but I saw things were falling apart around there, and I know what coaches do, kind of like Pete Carroll leaving USC and jumping to the NFL. But he's in LSU now. And I don't know. The recruiting base is there, but as long as Nick Saban's in the SEC, and now as long as Kirby Smart's in the SEC, and just the SEC overall being competitive as it comes to recruiting, I don't see them really getting a national championship. They may be up there in the top 5 or top 10 with some consistency, but I don't see them really going over the top like they had done in the past, even with Les Miles or Nick Saban before him, or even Ed Orgeron before he got fired. To see that, as a coach being that good to push a team to being a championship team, I just don't see it from Brian Kelly. So I don't know. I wasn't surprised they lost. I was just surprised how big the margin was, because I didn't believe in Jordan Travis too much for Florida State. He kind of shut it down yesterday, was really throwing the numbers up. The defense was playing like old Florida State. He's putting numbers up we haven't seen since Jameis Winston at Florida State. And we saw the results yesterday. Yeah, Jaden Daniels got that last second or last moment touchdown of 70 yards plus, made the numbers look a lot better. Yeah, exactly. And he made his numbers look a little better than they were. In fact, a lot better, because the dump passes he was doing, he wasn't going downfield a whole lot. The intermediate passes weren't necessarily there. He wasn't reading the defenses. And as I said last week, I would not be surprised if we hear about Garrett Nussmeier getting an opportunity sometime this season, whether because of injury or because, well, Jaden may not be getting the job done the way you would like for him to get it done.
Yeah, I just think Brian Kelly, to me, that's like a slap in the face. You keep going for it on 4th down. That defense is going to get fired. After they stopped him the first time, man, second time, you got to take the points, man. You just keep giving that defense more opportunities, and they get more hyped up. The offense comes out on the field hyped up because they just got a turnover on downs instead of getting a kickoff. There's a big difference in putting 3 on the board and getting stopped on 4th down. Getting the ball at the 30 instead of fair catching it or getting tackled at the 16 or something. There's a big difference there. And I don't think he was like a kid playing a video game yesterday. That's what I thought.
Well, things got to get better from him, because LSU fans were looking for something much better than this. It wasn't even a close game like it was last year when they played Florida State. This time, they were blown out, and it was close in the beginning. They had, put up a nice game, and then when Florida State got adjusted and went after the halftime and started pulling away, and they were just going time after time, scoring, just marching down the field with the passing and running. It didn't make a difference, and they couldn't be stopped, at least not by LSU. But now LSU and the SEC not looking so great, at least now. But we think about how top heavy the SEC is, whether it's Alabama and LSU or Alabama, Georgia, obviously Georgia going for a three-peat. But this is different this year. Later on, I guess, well, even right now, we could talk about the Pac-12 going 12-0 this weekend. I kind of much ado about nothing, because who the heck did they play?
Because they're really the Pac-2.
The Pac-2 now, and with the Mountain West calling, you might not have Pac anything. Pac-Man, pack your bags. There won't be a conference anymore. And so I'm thinking that the Pac-12 going 12-0, which is nice news if that's what you want to hear. But when you look at the teams that they faced, you look at Oregon winning 81-7 against Portland State. So, these are the teams you really face in the beginning of the season. Whereas South Carolina, as an SEC team, did play a ranked team in North Carolina. And LSU did play a ranked team in Florida State, and pretty much Florida State, when you look at Orlando not being too far from Tallahassee. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a nice storyline. I think when it comes down to it, the Pac-12 is going to show you why they decide to leave the Pac-12 with those players. But, Georgia, that's the other SEC team we're talking about. Carson Beck picks up what Stetson Bennett left off. He's going to try to pick up the baton and run the last leg for this three-peat and a 3-man relay. And, Tennessee Martin, a nice get your feet wet game. Let's see how these young parts work together, whether they're freshmen, whether they're seniors who haven't really played much. Carson Beck being one of those juniors, he looked all right. He looked the way he needed to look, they dominated the way they should have.
Yeah, but I don't really think it's much to write home about. He's really going to have to cut his teeth once they get into conference play
Mm-hmm.
and they start playing the stronger teams. That's when we're going to find out what's what.
Well, when you give up 132 yards rushing now to Tennessee Martin, you have a team like Alabama that's going to ultimately meet you, in my opinion, in the SEC championship game. But even before that, the SEC, you always are going to have some dogs running the ball there. So there's going to be some issues there if they can't show up that run defense, but Georgia gets their win. And then you move on to other teams who are on the list. Michigan, another team, missing their offensive coordinator, missing their head coach, getting the same result, still winning, putting up 30. It's pedestrian for their standards. They just did what Michigan does, just score. And J.J. McCarthy having an excellent day, and they just win the game.
Yeah, it was a ho-hum game. Let's go move on to next week. They really don't face anyone of note till week 3, Rutgers, and I'm not even sure if they're a note, but at least they're a conference team. So I mean, it was expected for them to come out and pound them. You just work out some kicks, work on your rhythm, and getting in sync with your receivers and linemen working together, opening holes. It's like a good life scrimmage.
Yeah, Blake Corum, you wanted to see how he looked coming off of injury as he did last season. Solid game, but J.J. McCarthy now looking better as a passer. A high completion percentage. I forgot what his numbers were in particular. It's 22 or 27, something like that. But he had a fantastic day in terms of his completion percentage. He still got his touchdowns. He's still athletic. So when he wants to run, he's going to run. But this isn't the team you wanted to see him do it against or not do it against. But because it's going to be much ado about nothing. And that, as you mentioned, Rutgers is going to be the only real named team. And I mean, name that people can remember, because, they beat Northwestern, in their game yesterday. And to talk about Northwestern, we mentioned it last week, how that kind of like disappeared. It's back on the scene, and they mentioned a lot of these things that have been happening at Northwestern, in the offseason leading into this game. And the way they played against Rutgers, I think those players have a lot on their mind. You can tell there's something going on in that coaching staff where the cohesion isn't there and the morale may not be there as well. Because Northwestern, even though they haven't been a top team for a while, or even a middling team, they played flat against Rutgers. I know it was in Piscataway, but they played flat against Rutgers. Rutgers played good defense, still can't run the ball, but they won the game.
It has to be difficult playing under that cloud that's hanging over them right now.
Yeah.
We don't know if anybody on this current team was involved in any of that stuff, victims of it. But they all have to have questions about what's going to happen to the program. What kind of sanctions are coming to them down the line. Some of them may have a foot out the door, like, hey, when those sanctions come in, I'm transferring. So, yeah, that's probably expected for them to come out, play flat, like they're not all there mentally, not all in, because they probably aren't all in.
You know what? And Rutgers does not care. A win is a win for them. They start off 1-0, which doesn't happen too often with Rutgers. Regardless of who they're playing, there's always either something that's going to go wrong. But you know what? With Greg Schiano being there for his second tenure at Rutgers, they played a good game for Rutgers standards. They still need a running game. I mean, since the days of Ray Rice and even Jawan Jameson afterwards, their running game just hasn't been much of anything over the years. A local guy from here in Jacksonville, Isaiah Washington, I watched him play at Trinity Christian High School, finally getting some passes, but he's averaging 9 yards of reception, the leading receiver. Come on, that just kind of lets you know the pedestrian, pretty slow offense they have right now. Maybe it gets better as they move on, but come on. Now, that leads us to another one of the bigger names, Alabama. Now, Alabama didn't have those issues that Georgia had in terms of stopping the run. Alabama stopped the run. They gave up about 72 yards on the ground, and they started off with the quarterback I did not believe they would start off with, and that was Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe went out there and had a very good game. I mean, come on, we can look at the competition, but a very good game. Tyler Buckner had a chance, the Notre Dame transfer who came along with his offensive coordinator from Notre Dame, Tommy Rees. He got an opportunity, but threw 3 passes, completed 2, got himself, I believe, 27 yards. And even young Ty Simpson got in there, the former five-star quarterback. But Alabama not playing games. They want to show right away that they can shut teams down. And they didn't even use their whole playbook because they take on Texas on Saturday.
Yeah, and they shouldn't use their whole playbook. You don't want to show Texas or have
No.
them get ready for anything specific that you plan to do against them. But we've talked about it before. I'm sure Saban is sick and tired of hearing about the Georgia Bulldogs. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he's telling his boys, this is a new year. You know, he's giving them those good old ball coach speeches to get them fired up. Hey, this is our year. But going back to Georgia not being able to stop the run, they gotta be careful. They gotta get that run defense shored up because you run into a team who they know they don't have the athletes. Hey, let's run ball control. They can't stop us, and before you know it, they've had time of possession in their favor. You know, so you gotta be careful. If they limit your possessions, you can find an L on your schedule real quick.
And based on the recruiting Georgia's done in the past several years, they have the athletes. It's just a matter of them acclimating themselves to big time college football with those types of expectations on the line, including going for a three-peat, which would be the first time, as we said last week as well, since Minnesota pre-World War II. So Georgia has a lot on their table as well in terms of pressure. And not to mention, look at the plays they've lost over the years. Even when you do all of that great recruiting that Alabama has done and Georgia has done, when you're losing those quality players to the NFL, mostly to high rounds, you're gonna show it eventually. I mean, even 2 years ago when they had 15 players and 5 players going on the defensive side of the ball, it was just a sick time. The number one
Mhm.
player overall in the draft as well, defensive player, Trayvon Walker. So
Right.
many players leaving that team time after time. Even when you reload, you probably have a smaller bullet. But eventually you hope that experience helps moving forward so that they will be ready when SEC play starts and they don't have a hiccup before SEC play starts, which is
Well,
not likely.
that would be really bad.
Yeah, we saw what happened years ago with Michigan and Appalachian State. Even though Appalachian State was a great 1AA team, Michigan's not supposed to lose to them, but they did.
Yeah, football can be a crazy game sometimes. You don't expect a Big Ten team to lose to Appalachian State, but it happened.
Yeah,
So you know, with the reduction of scholarships, you know, talent is spread around, much like college basketball. You got mid majors who make a lot of noise come tournament time now because that talent is spread around more now.
yeah. And but I think Georgia's gonna be fine. I mean,
Yeah, they should be.
yeah, they should be fine until because SEC play, they're supposed to have an easier schedule this year than they had last
I
year.
mean,
And I
if
thought last year was incredibly easy for them.
they they asked Giannis if he felt that the season was a failure after they got bounced in the playoffs this year. If Georgia loses to a Power Five school, this season's a failure. I don't
Yeah,
care if they win every game after that. This season's a failure.
yep, and another one of those teams in that top four, which is Ohio State, which is number 3 right now. But wow, did they look pedestrian themselves when they played? I mean, I wasn't, it was Indiana, and it is a Big Ten team. So I
Mhm.
kind of discounted Indiana last week, like, it's just Indiana. No, those boys came to play, and it is Big Ten play. And when you do recruiting as a college coach in football or basketball or anywhere else, you recruit for your conference more than you recruit for outside of your conference. So the guys you bring in or the women you bring in for whatever team you're coaching, they're specifically tailored towards the style of play in your conference, not for those games you may have on occasion outside of the conference. And Indiana knows the style of play that Ohio State runs or tries to run. And they were there for a little while until just the overall talent of Ohio State pulled them away. Al McCoy didn't look so great. That little familiarity I talked about last week between he and Marvin Harrison Jr., as Marvin Harrison Jr. and he were high school teammates, I thought it would kind of continue right now, at least not right now. Marvin Harrison had 2 catches for 18 yards. Not exactly the great way to start your Heisman campaign as we thought.
Yeah, imagine my disappointment when because this weekend's a very busy weekend for me. I've been having a beanbag tournament slash party for years, and then COVID came. I think we had it 6 years in a row,
Mhm.
and then this year's the first year I brought it back. And I always do it the Sunday before Labor Day because most people have the day today off.
Yeah.
So Saturday I was running around doing everything, getting the yard ready, and making preparations and whatnot. And then yesterday was the actual party. But I had a few minutes. I said, well, let me see what my boy Marvin Harrison did first game. Go to YouTube, find Ohio State, Indiana highlights, and I'm watching and I'm watching. I'm like, did they not throw him the ball? Then I saw they threw one to him and he landed awkwardly on his back.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he's down. My Heisman pick is down. And then I watched some more. He was up, got on his feet. I was like, man, there's not one Marvin Harrison Jr. highlight. What the heck is going on here? So I don't know if he mailed it in. It was Indiana. I'm sure he didn't. Yeah, I'm just talking crazy.
Well, I watched the
But
game.
I know he's like, man, I want to be a Heisman candidate. Throw me the ball. Give me the damn ball.
And they tried to get him the ball. It's just that he wasn't getting the ball, and the passes were pretty errant. Kyle McCord didn't throw a touchdown. He had one interception. Devin Brown got in there and didn't do a whole lot of anything else because he's more of the running threat. But Marvin Harrison, if the quarterback plays like this for the rest of the year or even some more of the year, they're gonna have some problems. I'm
He won't
expecting
even
things
get
to
an
get
invite.
better. I'm
Okay.
expecting things to get better. Ryan Day knows what he's doing by now. Obviously, he has the talent to get it done. But Kyle McCord was your ace in the hole going into this season with the familiarity with the offense and being, this just being an older player, being comfortable, understanding the maturation you have to have in order to do well in the Big Ten. He's been around these big games that Ohio State has been in. And for him to play the way he did, I was not impressed. And even if the numbers look better in terms of passing, I just wasn't impressed as I thought I would. Even with his first start, I was expecting a little bit more. Hopefully, there's something different for Ohio State's sake and for their fans' sake, different than what they've been watching, last Saturday. But as far as Marvin Harrison Jr., as that offense goes, he goes. As he goes, that offense goes. There's just the running backs and all that. Ohio State's been known for that. But this is one of those years where the Ohio State wide receiver may decide how successful that offense is going to be, as long as he has a quarterback who can put it in his vicinity.
Yeah, it's still early in the season. Maybe they weren't trying to show too much. Maybe fingers crossed. Just they're saving the good stuff for the real games. Although Indiana's a conference foe. You shouldn't take any conference team opponent lightly.
Nope.
But early in the season, maybe coach doesn't want to show too much. Who knows?
Well, let me pull back a little bit because the ACC did play a game on Friday night as well, and that was the Miami Hurricanes, who a lot is expected from this season because Mario Cristobal is in his second year with the Canes. They took on Miami, Ohio. So the battle between Miami, and this time Miami wins the game comfortably. They looked very good in that game, and I'm going to tell you very good from the standpoint of the individuals you saw that were added to the team and the individuals you saw that were part of the units were looking good. Because I remember years where Miami, and not distant memories recently, when they're beating Bethune-Cookman or they're beating FAMU by 30, 40, 50 points, you can see even in that blowout that, you know what, they blew them out, but man, there's so much they could do better, or they don't look as good as they should look. You're saying that with a blowout, but with this game, with a team like Miami of Ohio from the MAC, they returned 9 starters from last year. They were highly ranked defense, I believe, in the top 25 last year defensively. And a lot of those players came back. But Miami individually, for the first time since I've been watching them, watching them as of late when they haven't been the Miami of old, they started looking better. Tyler Harrell, the player that I thought would be the big name player, was not the player this time. He didn't even play in the game. It might be injury. It might be something else. His 29.1 yards per reception he had at Louisville, the no play that he did at Alabama, and nothing here in Miami. Young definitely did the job at the wide receiver spot. And he made the first touchdown, and I was surprised at that, but not really surprised. Lackawanna Junior College in Miami, almost always known for going back to the well. And in that case, Lackawanna Junior College was also the college that Bryant McKinney came from, the big offensive lineman. They go back to where they've had success before. This guy is from Binghamton, New York, typically a place that doesn't put out a lot of players that go to the South. You expect someone like him to be in Syracuse or Boston College, somewhere in the Northeast, maybe even Penn State. He's down here making plays. And all the running backs, I mean, everything looked good. Javion Cohen coming from Alabama as a transfer on the offensive line. The offensive line finally big and athletic instead of big and clumsy. They're mauling people on the run, and they have the athleticism to protect in the pass. The problem I'm having, if there's going to be a problem, is Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback. He didn't look as good as I believe he should have looked. His arm leaves a lot to be desired. I've always thought that, and it's accentuated now. So yeah, and now they're going
How
to play
big of
the
a
living
problem
room
is it
taking on
going to be?
Texas A&M.
How big of a problem is it going to be? Because I need them to be undefeated going to November 11th.
You know what? I was a little leery seeing how he threw his sideline passes and how the ball just kind of floated out there. And then the interception that he did throw, it was thrown downfield and it was way short and undercut and intercepted. Those are the things I'm worrying about. I'm looking for some
Doesn't
zip.
sound good.
I was looking for more zip, and there
So,
wasn't zip the way I thought it
who,
should have been.
who's on their schedule that I should be worried about before
Texas
Florida
A&M.
State? Oh
Texas A&M
man,
next Saturday down in Miami. And if you know what, and if I did not have to do a long run on Sunday, I was going down to Miami to watch that game. But uh, well, things happen. Life gets in the way of even games. But yeah,
right?
this is a game that's going to prove that if Miami's really on the map, or are they just beating up one of the sisters of the poor? I don't think Miami of Ohio is one of those sisters of the poor, but come on, they're not a Power Five conference team, even though they can be upset. They're not one of those teams. So Miami is legitimate. They should be able to beat Texas A&M, who had
At
a
least
big
they
win
got
of
them
their
at
own,
home.
and they got them at home. They went last year and played them in College Station, and Texas A&M beat them. It wasn't a blowout, but Miami showed that they were outmatched. And now they're coming down to Miami. Miami's team has been revamped. I think I give them a good chance. Um, I actually had them as a 3.5 point underdog going into this game, and the line comes out today 3.5 point underdog. Say, hey, I might find a new line of work. But anyway, Miami playing Texas A&M, and I just thought that the way they played Friday kind of gives Canes fans, if nothing else, an opportunity to be optimistic with some realization this time, instead of just thinking that we beat a bad team. This is the way we look. No, you beat a team that's solid, but the individuals looked a lot better this time around. And so that puts a lid on our college football talk right now, because the NFL starts on Thursday. Kansas City's taking on Detroit. Well, what's happening there? Is this one of those games that you just look at because of fantasy football, or are you trying to enjoy the NFL season?
I'm trying to enjoy the NFL season, especially since there's a lot of talk that Detroit should be taking a step up this year. They think they have playoff possibilities. Beating Kansas City week one would go a long way to helping that cause. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there'll be a Super Bowl hangover. I think Andy Reid, Mahomes, and Kelsey and those guys, although they're missing Chris Jones, they're professionals and they want to come out and make a statement. They're not going to come out and lay an egg on Thursday night. Everybody watching, it's not like it's a Sunday afternoon game when everybody's playing. Um, the only game in town kicking off the season, they're not going to come out there and lay an egg. They're going to be ready to go. And if they still have Super Bowl talent, they'll handle the Lions.
Yeah, they should. And the Lions taking a step up, as you said. They're in your division with your team. So I know you have a little extra concern about whether they're going to be good or not. But Jahmyr Gibbs, that's the one that has me wanting to see what Detroit does. Whoever really wanted to see what Detroit does outside of being in Detroit, unless they had a player. That last player, in my opinion, was either Megatron or Barry Sanders. Take your choice of the two. But then you have a player. I believe they have a player now who could put butts in the seats, be electric, and help the team out a lot. That's why they picked him so early, when some people thought he shouldn't have gone that early. But then you have on Monday night, to put a lid on the week of NFL football, the Jets taking on the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. Well, the Jets are underdogs, even at home, with Aaron Rodgers on the slate. But Buffalo with Stephon Diggs, we talked about his nonsense from the beginning of training camp, even before that. Does that bother anybody in the locker room? Is that going to be toxic and just cause a bad environment on the road to where the Jets can pull it off?
We'll have to wait and see. As far as the betting line, I think Vegas probably thinking if they make the Jets the favorites, they'll get all the money because they're at home. They got Rodgers and Bills have the the Diggs issue going on. So they have to balance out the money. But we'll see what Rodgers can do in his new green. Buffalo's no pushover. They have a solid defense, and it should be a really good game. And whoever comes out of that, they'll have the upper hand. But still a lot of football to be played, so it won't make or break anybody's season. But you just hope Diggs gets his stuff ironed out and doesn't sabotage the Bills.
Well, your boys got a 1-point favorite that's from Vegas against Green Bay. So does that make you feel any better, or just like, oh well, it's only because of Jordan Love coming in and starting?
There's
Or
so
you
many
still
questions.
down on the
There's so
Bears?
many question marks. Is Justin Fields going to take a step up? Is Jordan Love going to take a step up? Obviously, I hope he doesn't. At least I hope he doesn't against us, or to be like, oh man, here we go, another quarterback gonna be talking smack to the Bears. I don't know. Brett Favre was kind of good natured. Aaron Rodgers' smack was more towards the fans because them idiots were talking shit to him.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully, they break the string of great quarterbacks with Jordan Love.
Yeah, hopefully.
I mean,
I
I'm not
mean,
trying to hate on the guy. I'm just saying I don't want him beating my Bears.
not against you, at least. If he's going to be great, be great. Don't be great 2 times a year if he's playing against your team.
Right.
But Jordan Love, I think is going to be a solid player. I didn't see star around him, but the other player you've seen the Green Bay Packers draft in the past in terms of quarterback, you had an idea whether or not they were going to be good or have the potential to be great. I remember when Aaron Rodgers came out of the draft, and it was the same year that Alex Smith from Utah was the #1 pick overall. I was at that draft, and the day before that draft, they had a luncheon at Chelsea Pier in New York. And I was there, and I spoke with Aaron Rodgers, and I was telling him, yo, you're better than Alex Smith. You might even go first tomorrow. And he was like, yeah, you smile and whatnot. Next day, he drops to like the 23, I think. So we get into the lunchroom the next day, the area they go into, the media room after they get picked. I'm like ducking from him, like, yo, I was wrong on that one. But hey, fast forward now, I was right.
You jinxed him.
Jinxed him from being the #1 pick overall, but he's a Hall of Famer. Alex Smith isn't. Not even close. Matter of fact, Alex Smith and I can probably go to the Hall of Fame together if we pay. Because that's the only way we get in there. But that was a good deal with Aaron Rodgers. So you could see he was going to be great. Brett Favre had a lot of issues coming out of Southern Miss in terms of him, his decision making, but his arm strength and all that wasn't deniable. And of course, the Jets missed that opportunity to get him because the Falcons ended up getting him. We get Brown and Nagel. The rest is history. But
the thing about Favre though was we had Lovey back then, and Lovey, man, if he wasn't focused on one thing, it was beating the Packers. He said that in his introductory press conference, and they used to beat Favre and the Packers. I mean, he had some games where he put up some ridiculous numbers. I remember on Halloween night, he probably had like 380 yards and ran for like a 53-yard touchdown. How do you let Brett Favre run for like a 53-yard touchdown in the snow? I mean, it had to be crazy circumstances. It was Halloween night, not snow, heavy rain, muddy field. You let Brett Favre run that far so. Aaron Rodgers was a different story. He beat us to go to the Super Bowl, and he's doing his belt. Man, I don't like that guy.
But going back to Brett Favre, I remember him when he came down here to Jacksonville and played when Jacksonville actually had a pretty decent team, especially their defense when they weren't giving up 100-yard games to running backs. But he's not a running back. He started picking them apart, throwing the ball. It was a Monday night game, I believe. In fact, it was because I remember the guys were in the booth next to us in the press box, and Lennox Lewis came into the press box that day. Lennox Lewis just beat Mike Tyson not too long before, since then. And, people were congratulating him in the press box and whatnot. But Brett Favre had a night that night. I think he threw 3 touchdowns. I think the Jags might have lost 28-7. But it was good. And Brett Favre, shouldn't be running. Come on, you let Brett Favre run. Something's going awry, man. He's not that kind of quarterback.
You can look it up on YouTube. I'm sure it's out there.
Yeah, but he's a tough dude. Always been known to.
Tough guy. But he gave Strahan that last sack though. You talk about his toughness. He didn't try to get away. He just slid. Hey, take this sack. There you go, record. Happy birthday.
Yeah, and Michael Strahan is gonna defend it to this day. No, he didn't try. He didn't give it to me. Yeah, whatever, man. We'll take it for what it is. Let's move on with that one. And by the way, the NBA, we're talking the NBA, we're talking about NBA players and
Not
FIBA
really
losing to
NBA.
Lithuania. What's the deal here, man? I mean, seriously, what is the deal? I know the U.S. doesn't dominate basketball like they did. There are no longer 80-point blowouts, but to lose to Lithuania, who's already beaten you before, man.
Yeah, they obviously didn't send their best players, but the way they lost, they were down 33-12, I think, at one point. And
Yeah.
where's the defense? Yeah, they shot 47% from three or whatever it was. I don't know. But not only that, they're backing Austin Reeves down, just throwing these little hooks. I mean, where was Patrick Beverly saying too small, too small? They were just in the lane all night. They must have scored 60 points in the paint in addition to the 3 pointers they were splashing. I mean, where's the defense, man?
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I they got a dunk off an inbounds play from under the basket, and then they got another back door. I thought I was watching the Globetrotters versus the Washington Generals. I thought, what the hell is this? Where's the defense?
well, that's a microcosm of probably what the NBA is now. Who plays defense? You should have just put James Harden out there and let him play defense because that's how they were playing. But yeah, the U.S. isn't as far ahead anymore in basketball. We've known that for some time now. I still contend that Australia is the top team overall in basketball in the world outside of the United, second best in the United, the second best in the country aside from the U.S. But there are so many others that are third and probably fourth or fifth who can give problems, and Lithuania is one of those teams that gives the U.S. problems. Greece on occasion, maybe, but they've gotten blown out already. But Spain and France also teams that can play. Argentina
Right.
too.
But no Greek freak, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does.
But I mean, to be down 33-12, that's like running into a buzzsaw. Lithuania was obviously ready to play. USA, not so much. They tried to come back, but it was just too big of a hole. And even when they cut the lead down, Lithuania still got the shots they wanted. You know, they
Yeah.
ran their offense, guys open in the corner, no look passes here, cut backdoor cut here for a layup. It was all about defense. They couldn't get the stops when they needed it.
It's unbelievable how athletic they are, and if they really put their mind to playing defense, they can obviously play defense. I guess they just got it into their muscle memory not to play defense. Just as much as you don't play it, you build the tolerance for not playing defense. And on an international game, when the rules got a little bit tweaked, well, it's going to
It,
get you.
it was just funny. It was just funny to see. I mean, you're thinking they might be calling for a clock in the post because Austin Reeves was getting back down all night. And mouse in the house, throw it over here. Bounce, 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 fake right, fake left, little hook. Come back
Fundamental
down.
basketball.
Mouse in the house. I'm like, man, Austin Reeves is getting worked. He couldn't do nothing. I mean, he's in front of him, keeping his hands up, but they just abused him, man.
In fundamental basketball, that's what they have over there that we don't necessarily have here in spades. People have the athleticism over here, but in terms of the fundamentals, yeah, they use the fundamentals to get to where they wanted to go, but then the athleticism takes over and they just do the freelance thing and the cohesion as a team. Well, the US doesn't have that. But when you go overseas, just basic fundamentals is going to beat all that flash and dash most of the time. And this is one of those times where it happened. They still qualify for the Paris Olympics next year. And hopefully they'll be, maybe there'll be a little bit more interest now that they may not win a gold medal when they get out there. So maybe, it'll give them something to put a fire under their butt and probably make them play better, make them play a little bit more defense and, still show their dominance, at least for where it stands right now in the world of basketball.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they're still in it. They could possibly win it all, but I don't know. I'm sure a lot of teams breaking that film down now. Okay, how can we do the same thing? If they can't play defense and they're going to allow their opponents to shoot high percentage from three and get so many buckets in the paint, there's no way you can win. You would have to shoot like 65% from three to counteract all of that, and that's not going to happen.
Yep. And finally tonight, speaking of beating down, well, Bomac, the trainer of Bud Crawford, well, got arrested in the UK carrying a gun, a firearm. He's a licensed carrier in Nebraska, but I don't think the message got to him that you can't carry guns from the US to another country, especially the UK. It's not
Obviously,
transferable. It doesn't happen like that. So now he has to stay in the UK until I believe October 6th is when he sees the judge. And with their gun laws over there, they don't play games. He could be locked up for years over that. And I know he has somewhat of a celebrity status over here, but he's not Brittany Griner. So I don't know what could happen.
yeah. I would like to know, what was he thinking? Why would he need a firearm in the UK? Did he think he's going to get jumped by hooligans or something? I would like to know what. I honestly would like to know what was going through his mind traveling, thinking he needs a gun over there.
Well,
Hopefully they understand it's a different culture over here. He had a license over here. Maybe go lightly on him. I mean, did he harm anybody? Did he attempt to use it on anybody? To my knowledge, no. So, how serious is the crime actually?
well, I think it even goes deeper because the first question is how did he get past TSA with a gun to go overseas? So you got issues there. So when he gets over there, if he didn't do that, he may have gotten a gun over there. So who gave you the gun? So now you
Right.
got other issues. Man, it goes down a rabbit hole with this. And it could get worse before it gets better. And even with him having some status in the United States, I, I don't believe I've ever heard, or at least not that I know of, not that I've even paid attention, that the UK would have leniency against something like that. They really are big against guns. I mean, they
Yeah, I know.
police
I'm
the
just
crap
saying,
out of it.
in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a serious crime. He didn't try to use it. We didn't point it at anybody. He didn't use it as a weapon. He
Yeah.
just had it.
But as an American, yeah, we see that as seemingly like common sense because we've tolerated a lot of BS over here. In other countries where there is a no tolerance, that I guess they do mean no tolerance. And I
Yeah.
guess wherever their laws are their laws. And if it says you get 5 years for carrying a gun, doesn't matter who the heck you are, that's probably what's going to happen. Whereas over here, if the person has the right amount of money, he might not get the time, or he might not have to worry about that or this
Maybe we can trade him for Pierce Morgan.
that. Piers Morgan,
Yeah,
huh?
like give us Bo Mac, we'll send you Pierce back.
Well, Pierce does some good work every now and then. I like
I
some of
just,
the.
I'm just saying,
He's grown on me,
I don't
Pierce
have
Morgan.
anything against him. I'm just saying you gotta give something back if you want something. So let's
Well,
give
you know
him
what?
the Pierce.
Hey, I'd rather have Bomac back here because Bud needs to prepare for fights, and there's some big fights
Right,
coming up.
especially if he's gonna fight Canelo. Bud
Or,
needs his
or,
man.
or even now that Spence has triggered his rematch clause, or whether it's this year or
Ah,
next year, I know it's not going to get the same buzz. Some people probably believe, okay, he might do it at 154, even though the option is up to Bud on whether or not he wants to fight at 147 or 154. And if he's the dog, we know he is. He'll say 154, I'll beat you down. If he's the
right,
businessman, he should be. I'll say I beat you at 147, make you struggle, come back down to 147.
right. Yeah, I agree with that. We'll see, but Bud has aspirations of moving up in weight himself,
Fighting Canelo.
and he'd be like, "Well, this would be a good tune-up. I know I'm gonna whip this dude's ass. So let me just instead of struggling to get down to 147 myself, I'll just go down to 154 and see how I feel."
Yeah, let Canelo take care of that Charlo business first, and let's hope he can take care of that Charlo business because right now, as it stands, I'm kind of leaning towards Charlo. I think that John Ryder fight really showed something about Canelo taking a step back. Finally, he
Well,
was in his prime for quite some time.
it's, it's been a few years since he's been off the tainted meat.
And that's another thing. So he
It's
might be
hard
able
to
to beat
stay at
that at
that level
154.
without the tainted meat. But before you wrap it up, I do got a couple of things I want to mention. Not a hit
Yeah.
list, just things I
Oh,
want to
okay.
mention.
I'm about to give you the stage.
No, 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 no. Well, shout out to your boy, Aaron Judge. He hit his 250 at the home run.
Yeah.
And shout out to my boy, Tim Anderson. He got his 1,000 hit.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Uh, White Sox having a rough season, Yankees having a rough
Whew.
season. So, we got to point out the good stuff when it comes along. So, shout
Yeah.
out to those guys. I think Miguel Cabrera hit his
Oh
510th or
man.
something.
Underrated player, man. I mean, even though he got his props, man, he's still underrated, even in his
Yeah.
later
He
years.
I think he might. It seems like he might be hanging around a little bit too long. He's not even close to the player he used to be. But when you look at his resume, man, the triple
Oh, without
crown,
a doubt. Come
all
on,
those
first
home runs,
ballot.
all those RBIs, 300 average. I mean, that dude was an amazing hitter, man. I don't
Wasn't
know
this
how
his
the
last
Marlins
season?
let him go, huh?
Isn't this his last season? I
Yeah,
think he retired after this season. Yeah, bro. Come on, man. He was a beast when he first came on the set. He stayed out there doing it, playing the way he's playing. In his latter years, obviously, like most players, they kind of get injured more and they don't play as well. But yeah, and for him to get these milestones right now, kind of like Albert Pujols. We knew he wasn't the old Albert from back in the day, but man, they gave Albert what he deserved the last season he played.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I
So
hope Yankees get
congratulations to him. He's definitely a Hall of Famer. Hopefully, he finishes strong. It's just the White Sox played him a bunch of times,
Mhm.
and he comes up to the plate, and they show he's got a 242 average, 7 home runs. They're like, oh, come on, Miggy. But he announced it. He's doing his best. He'll get a big hit here and there, but it's for the Tigers. They're not going anywhere. So.
Nah. And the Yankees aren't going anywhere. The Tigers aren't going anywhere. The Mets aren't going anywhere. Man, unbelievable. All this money spent and people just staying parked.
Oh wait, and Otani, man, I see. I
Otani,
think
man.
I may have jinxed him because I brought up. Remember, I said I don't know how long he's going to continue to be a pitcher, and you said, well, that's going to be part of the contract, and he can pitch and this and that. And then a few days later, he had the elbow problem. Now
Elbow
he's shut
injury.
down for pitching, and he
Yeah.
lost a lot of money with that injury, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you look at, and I guess culturally, you would think that the Japanese aren't into the money as much as we are as American people. Perhaps, maybe not. But, I think a $400 million contract for him, I think he'll be satisfied with that as well. I don't think he's going to cry about that. And by the way, also 40-20 club for him. 20, with the 20 stolen bases, the 40 home runs, that's pretty
Mhm.
doggone six.
Oh
And we
yeah,
didn't
he's
even,
still amazing batter. And
and we didn't even
Acuna
talk about
30 and 60.
and Ronald Acuna, yeah, 40 and 60. Ronald
30,
Acuna, 40 and
30,
60.
30 and 60.
You know, I'm saying Ronald Acuna. I was
Yeah,
gonna go. I think you said Ronald Acuna, but Ronald Acuna,
I
40 and
did.
60. Oh,
Now
yeah.
I'm saying 30. I don't think he reached 40 yet.
Already? I thought it was 40-60 by now. Ronald Acuna?
Yeah. I
Oh,
don't know
okay. I
if
think he got
my bad. If he hit 40 home runs, then my bad. But I thought it was 30. But the
okay.
home run he hit the other night, man, the hardest hit ball this year, 122 velo off the bat. He got
This
all of that one. And he hit a home run
unbelievable
in
how
every
good
game
that
against
guy
the
is.
Dodgers. You talk about who's your daddy. Acuna Jr. owns the Dodgers.
He owns the Dodgers. That's why I think they're going to be the World Series champs, man. I don't think the American League has anything to offer, and it's not because the Yankees aren't in it. If the Yankees were there, they'll just be an easy out as well, going against the way Atlanta's been playing. I mean, the Orioles are in allegedly the best division because for so long this season there were teams above 500. Obviously, the Yankees aren't now, but things are looking good for Acuna and the Atlanta Braves. A very good team from the very beginning, kind of like from start to finish, and here they are. And going into the playoffs, who's going to stop them? They took care of the Dodgers, the one who had probably the best chance of beating them. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
it is a regular season, but
stranger
still.
things have happened. In the playoffs, you get in the short series, anything can happen. You run against a hot pitcher,
Mm-hmm.
and if they run him 3 times out against you, that's 3 losses. So you never know.
Yeah, I remember that Mike Scott effect back in 1986 with the Houston Astros and the Mets with that split finger fastball. They didn't want to see that guy again. They went, I think, 16 innings. They didn't want to see him again, man. They were like,
I,
"Yo, bro,
I'm pretty sure he was scuffing the ball though. I mean, he
Mike
was like
Scott."
a one year, yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
was
was a
like
one year bro.
a 1 year wonder. After
That
that,
dude was a beast when he was at that time. He that split finger, man. People have heard of the split finger before. After that, people were trying to split finger and all that. I was like, God, he was a sick for that
yeah,
time. The Mets didn't want to see a game 7, and they didn't. They got rid of him, ultimately playing Boston and winning the World Series, blah, blah, blah. Their last one, by the way. But anyway, that'll be it for us. The episode has now come to a close. Football is all this week. Baseball, we're trying to trip into that. There's so much more going on. We made it from the doldrums of the summertime where there isn't much going on, making up things as we go, to now having real things to talk about. And also this week here, we're going to talk about on Wednesday, we're going to get into some Meldrick Taylor and Julio Cesar Chavez.
We're gonna put
Once
it
and
to
for
bed
all.
finally. Yes, once and for all.
Yeah, once and for all, we got to come to a conclusion on was it the proper way to stop a fight, or should he have been given the opportunity to get his glory?
You
Our
you, you
Trav.
kind of answer it right there, even in that question. But we'll leave it for Wednesday.
All right. Our Trav, he's biased. It's time to go. Out.
Peace.